Dear friends, this is Bishop Daniel Thomas of the Diocese of Toledo. Please join me now in praying together our diocesan prayer. Heavenly Father, with the redeeming cross of Christ Jesus, your Son, and the gifts of your Holy Spirit, renew and strengthen us, so that by our prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, we may foster holy disciples, holy families, and holy vocations, so as to become a more holy diocese of Toledo. We turn to Our Lady, Queen of the Most Holy Rosary, for her intercession and never-failing prayers. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Annunciation Radio presents Faith Alive, highlighting the many ways Catholic Charities here in the Diocese of Toledo provides love and support for those in need. And now, your host for Faith Alive, Executive Director of Catholic Charities in Toledo, Rodney Schuster.
Hello and welcome to Faith Alive. I'm your host, Rodney Schuster. Today we are going to talk about family. And we've got our guest, Father Larry Rice, who is the chaplain at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. And he hosts a number of video series that are sponsored by the USCCB on Catholic social teaching, with titles such as Option for the Poor, Role of Government, Social Justice, Dignity of the Human Person. And really, we're going to hone in on how we are one human family connected to a single human community. And to help bring us some local insights to this as well, we're going to have Willi Meyer on, who's the facility manager at La Posada Family Shelter for Catholic Charities, Diocese of Toledo. And I don't think this could be overstated. Right now, families are under attack in our country and in our society and in culture. And, Pope St. John Paul II, when he was, pontiff, really, focused on the need and the importance and the value of family and how family goes in our society. That's how the world will go. And right now, the Institute of Marriage and Family are under attack. And so, we as Catholics, we as our role here on radio and TV and social services, we've got to stand firm. We've got to be courageous. We've got to emphasize that, this is what God intended. This is what Jesus asked us to do. And, it's getting more and more of a challenge in this life, in this world, to be advocates, to stand up, and in a way, too, that is charitable, with mercy, so there can be discussion, not argumentation all the time, not, hey, it's this or that, and because then we close all the doors. So that's going to be our topic today. We're pretty excited, and I'm glad to bring back one of our frequent guests who represents not only La Posada, but Knights of Columbus and many, many other efforts within our diocese, within St. Joan of Arc Parish, and at Catholic Charities. Willi Meyer, welcome back to Faith Alive.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I am doing great. And, Willi, I want to start out. So let's just start we'll get into La Posada and about the importance of the work that we do on family. But in your other roles, like I mentioned, and you're really engaged at Joan of Arc and yep. As well as Knights of Columbus. From those seats and those perspectives, how do you see your role in family and emphasizing and strengthening those, and how the Knights of Columbus and the Parish of St. Joan of Arc are doing some things to help encourage that most necessary component in our society?
I think some of it goes back to the basics of the family, engaged couples retreats, marriage couples retreats, then the retreat for a couple who's having difficulty in rebuilding and reconnecting something that they lost along the way. So that's always been there, and having gone through engaged couples, having gone through marriage couples, and working with a very great priest in our diocese, the emphasis was always on creating one. It was always on creating that one within the family, creating that one within the community, and that you saw yourself as a part of a larger family. So it's in keeping with the basic teachings of the Catholic Church. I just finished a series on Catholic social justice teachings, and I was watching and going, "Wow, I'm doing really good." So you see that kind of stuff. You receive that kind of affirmation. There are times when you wonder, are you really doing what you need to be doing? And so when you see this kind of information come to you in the format that it did, it really kind of just pats you on the back and says, you're doing a good job. Keep fighting the fight. Keep running the race, and make things happen. And that's the same thing over at St. Joan of Arc. I mean, we probably house and host many retreats that involve families, and we do activities that involve families, everything from Halloween trick-or-treat out of the trunks of cars to meeting with the children and handing out, the rosaries in the first grade, and handing out Bibles to our confirmandi in the 7th and 8th grades. So everything to encourage their growth as an individual and also as a member of their own family. Currently, in fact, it just started on July 1, the Knights of Columbus have put out a opportunity for all the Knights of Columbus and every parish that we're connected with to look at the family unit, to look at the heart, and it's called core. And I'm not really good at Greek, but I think a core means heart, and it's looking at the heart of the family and the core of Catholic teachings, and it works its way through the opportunities that are available for a family in the Knights of Columbus and beyond. So there's many different ways to touch a family and to assist the family along the way.
You listen to Faith Alive, and our guest is Willi Meyer, who's the facilities manager at La Posada Emergency Family Shelter for Catholic Charities in the Diocese of Toledo. But he's also expanding his perspective for this discussion about family with his roles in the Knights of Columbus as well as St. Joan of Arc Parish here in Toledo. Willi, so, you mentioned some of the great things that are happening at St. Joan of Arc. And you and I have both been married for a number of years, and so
39 this October.
Congratulations! I'll be 35 this November, so
there you go.
I'm catching up
to you.
Good. But we know, and of course we've had other friends that also. But this marital covenant and how we honor that covenant, and when you talk about a covenant and a bond, and a covenant is forever. I think sometimes we get lost in our culture because everything is just like, okay, well, it's getting uncomfortable, or I don't like this, or I don't like that, or it's difficult. Yep. And so then it's like, our culture just says, well, you want to fix it. And a lot of times fix it means, well, get a divorce, right? That's the easy thing to do. So how is that, for you personally in the work that you're doing? You mentioned with the Knights and some of the great initiatives of St. Joan of Arc. Yep. How does that help fuel and strengthen your covenantal marriage?
It does in a lot of different ways, and in fact, it's kind of ironic. I kind of lost sight of my wife yesterday, and she didn't really know where I was for like 5 or 6 hours, which concerned her a little bit. And but I was into doing what I typically do, and that's to serve, and kind of lost my perspective. And she got a hold of me, and she kind of laid down the law, and I listened. And you got to take that correction. And that's also part of fixing. I mean, anybody can throw a log onto a burning fire, but it's the person who throws a bucket of water or a bucket of sand on that fire so that it actually goes out. Yeah. And for me yesterday was saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And sometimes as an individual, as a father, as a husband, those two words don't come very easily.
Well, especially after, 39 years.
39 years.
You just figure, you know what, it doesn't matter anymore, but it does, because
it does matter.
God calls us to a higher standard.
Absolutely.
God expects us to every day to strive to be the best person, the best husband, the best father that we can be. And so if we lose sight of that, we can become, in essence, prideful and say, you know what, I can do whatever the heck I want. We'll never get divorced. It's, 39 years until we die. Yeah. But then that can, again, turn away from God and then also weaken the family structure.
Yeah, it does. And, my wife, being as clever as she is, she employed the assistance of our son, who called me and said, have you talked to Mom today?
Uh-oh.
So, I even got it from my son. And so I said, I will talk to Mom, and I will take care of this, and I will clean this up. It's my fault. And so it's the difference between taking care of and making a difference versus saying, I'm not going to do that, and walking away. I mean, anybody can walk away.
Right. You listen to Faith Alive, and our guest is Willi Meyer, who heads up the facilities at La Posada Emergency Family Shelter for Catholic Charities. So, Willi, let's transfer, what we just talked about the role that you have and the role that Catholic Charities has with families at La Posada Family Shelter. How do you incorporate as best as possible, the family values that we know, that we live by, realizing that so many people that come to our facilities have endured so much more in the way of perhaps abuse, perhaps addictions, perhaps, financial hardship, broken relationships, abusive relationships, so they aren't starting at the same point that we are.
Correct.
So how do you then incorporate that into your ministerial work at La Posada for families?
They may not be starting at the same point that I did, but the struggles are not too much different than from what other people have gone through, and myself included. So you pull from those experiences and you share in a way that they understand that they're not alone. Mm. They're not by themselves. And we had a situation the other day where this young man was verbally aggressive towards his mom. Mm. And I'm not comfortable with that. Yeah. And so I didn't want to shame him. I did not want to embarrass him. So when I could get him quietly away, I said to him, how you were talking to your mom made me feel uncomfortable. Mm. And it wasn't helpful to you in what you were trying to do. And he was trying to rationalize it. And I said, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. But she's your mom, mm-hmm. and you really need to talk to her differently. Yeah. And he looked at me and he said, I wasn't happy with what I did either. Okay, so we've got acknowledgement. So he sees the difference. He understands the difference. So it's different from trying to bring a person from square A. He's already at M. Mm. And we just have to move him a little bit further down the road, patiently, compassionately, comfortably, so that when he makes these changes and he makes these adjustments in his communication, it becomes internalized and he's able to do it whether I'm standing there or not. That's the gift that a person gives in that kind of situation.
Yeah, you're listening to Faith Live. Our guest is Willi Meyer, who's the facilities manager at La Posada Emergency Family Shelter, and we're talking today about really the strength of family and the need for family, and how it's important not only for us individually and for all who are listening, but in our shelter that we have, La Posada, where we're trying to help folks meet them where they're at,
yes,
with love and mercy, but then help instill the importance and necessity of. And I think, Willi, you hit it, on that point really well. So much of it is just from a simple fact of just being respectful.
Exactly.
Be respectful to your mother, for goodness sake.
Yes.
And that example alone is just kind of like, hey, in order to be the person that God created you to be, He asked us then to carry ourselves in a way that is Christ-like, and
exactly.
so necessary as well. And, Willi, I can't help but think of a family that's been such an integral part of La Posada, both as guests at La Posada, but then also in giving back. And I'm thinking of Maximo and his family.
Yes.
And how he had to come to those crossroads as well with himself personally and individually to say, all right, I've got to get my act together, and La Posada is going to help me do that. And, and when I do that, then I'm going to give back. I'm going to be a role model. I'm going to try to help, instill those family values in my family, just like the folks at La Posada are doing for me. So I think, we're getting close on break here. So Willi, when we get back, let's talk a little bit more about, like Maximo as an example, but just how we try to reach people. So we're going to head to break, so stay tuned for this week's Social Justice in the Bible with Peter Sibilio. We'll be right back.
Hello again, everybody. Peter Sibilio here from Lourdes University. Each week we look at the Bible and do it justice. Social justice. In other words, how do our ancient scriptures give us marching orders in Toledo today? And Lord knows the other side is out marching in force. How about that Pride Month? It was everywhere. We heard that pride is universal, but we never saw one commercial or picture of a traditional family going to church or praying around the dinner table. So I guess there's nothing in our universe that we should be proud of? Well, that's certainly the way it will seem on November 8th if we don't get to work before November 7th. That is Judgment Day. We won't just make judgments on abortion. We will be passing judgment on ourselves. That is when CICA just might come to a vote. The so-called Citizen Initiative Constitutional Amendment for the Right to Make Reproductive Decisions, including Abortion Initiative, comes up. Phew, did you ever notice how evil needs lots of syllables to cover up its lies? Yeah, but the devil has been doing that ever since he sold fruit in the garden. And make no mistake, this initiative truly has the devil in the details. It creates and enshrines a constitutional right to abortion and any other fertility treatments and reproductive decisions. Well, you might say that doesn't sound so satanic, but Satan never does. Just eat this fruit and you will become more godly. Yet when we did, we lost God's presence. Just do what I say and you will live forever. Yet that is when death entered the world, and the very Son of God was put to death just to give us new life. Yet we still bring death to the unborn here in Ohio. Just the past year saw over 20,000 abortions in Ohio alone. And that is since we overturned Roe versus Wade. That massacre is what passes for good news? And still the devil wants more. We know the Bible forbids abortion. Perhaps our clearest picture is with a choice, Mary's. Where would we be if she did not choose life? That is too terrible to picture. So picture this. Game day. Michigan comes to face the Buckeyes at the Horseshoe. Suddenly, but silently, the top of the horseshoe just disappears. 20,000 people gone. No game, no breath, no chance, and no choice. That is what's happening right here at home each year. And still, the devil wants more. Better roll out some fancy words for that, like, quote, reproductive decisions, unquote. Google that phrase and what comes up? Transgender surgeries for children, whether parents even know about it or not. Make no mistake, that is what this decision will reproduce, and that is what's next. If the devil can't kill the future of families in wombs, he will do it in classrooms. And if he can't kill the family of faith in our pews, he will just get us too busy to care. So what can we do? Plenty. Maybe it's stopping shopping at a store that pushes this agenda. Maybe it's forgoing your favorite beer. But don't worry, we know that Bud Light is water that is just trying to identify as beer. And so we need to do more than that. We must reach out to Ohio Right to Life and its director, Peter Range. We know their mission to promote and defend the right to life of all innocent human beings from conception until natural death. But that means more than just abortion. It means defending our kids against all this gender-bender junk that assaults them every day. So let me end with a story about them. Many young people have asked me about abortion and transgender distortion, and they think those things might be okay because so many good people do nothing to stop them. That's right, they're not just looking at their phones, they are looking at us. And that cloud of witnesses in Hebrews isn't just in heaven, it's in our homes. Make no mistake, brothers and sisters, there will be an election on November 7th. But what will our children see on November 8th? Let's see more and do more right now. Go to OhioRightToLife.com right now. Look at their videos exposing this legislation. Reach out to them. Give them your time, treasure, and tears. The way we win in November is by working with Ohio Right to Life right now. What a way to do justice to our scriptures. What a way to do justice with Jesus. And what a way to keep our faith alive.
I was actually raised in the Catholic Church. I went to grade school through 6th grade, and pretty much about the time I went to high school, I stopped attending church and really didn't think much more about it for a number of years. The return to church, the Catholic Church, was somewhat of an evolution. I thought I knew what the Catholic Church believed and taught, but learned very quickly from somebody who knew far more about the Bible than I ever hoped to know. I learned that the Catholic Church, what it truly taught, and that's where I needed to be. I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict. Without God in my life, I'd probably be dead. God has literally saved my life. I feel like I'm truly on the road to the fulfillment of really all of my desires, which is ultimately to spend eternity in heaven with myself and my family.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church for whatever reason, we invite you to take another look. Visit CatholicsComeHome.org today.
Your smart device is even smarter with the Annunciation Radio mobile app, available free in your app store or at AnnunciationRadio.com. Check out the latest Bishop's Corner and send a question for the next one right there. Get the Annunciation Radio app today.
Now, back to Faith Alive with Rodney Schuster, Executive Director of Catholic Charities here in the Diocese of Toledo.
Welcome back to Faith Alive. I'm your host, Rodney Schuster, Executive Director for Catholic Charities in the Diocese of Toledo. And today we're focusing on the need for family and strengthening family and, tying that in with Catholic social teaching and how those foundational values are so necessary in family and so necessary just in our everyday lives. Our guest is Willi Meyer, who's the facilities manager for La Posada Emergency Family Shelter for Catholic Charities in the Diocese of Toledo. And before break, we were talking, just some example that you gave,
yes.
Speaking with a young man at La Posada, and then I was talking about another example in Maximo, who's been with our facility a couple times,
yes.
and he has made that commitment to himself, but more so to himself, because every time we talk to him, it's about he wanted to be the role model for
yes.
his family.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to be example for his family. So Willi, maybe from a bigger perspective, tie in some of the things that in working with Maximo that you then incorporate into working with other families, especially dads, to help them. Because, I always say we can't do more for people what they don't want to do for themselves.
Absolutely.
But when they want to engage, when they want to, change whatever circumstances that they're in, maybe some bad decisions, bad choices they made,
yes.
how do we then, engage with them?
I think it's creating a relationship. It's making ourselves available. It's making ourselves vulnerable. It's making ourselves respectful and open to listening to what's being said. Because there's a lot of garbage that you hear first until you actually get to the real meat of the issue, the real core of the concern, the real center of the problem. And sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sessions before that actually comes to a reality. Now, that reality is known to them. And we as professionals may have an idea of what that reality is, but until we hear it from them, it's hard for us to speculate any further. So that's part of being respectful, meeting them where you're at and talking to them in their language. And sometimes that language is not language I'm comfortable with,
Right.
but there are times when I do have to get a little salty, and they, at that point, understand that that's not something that I like to do, and they wonder.
Yeah.
They wonder what brought me to that point, and I explain it because I couldn't get your attention. You continue to go down this way, and I'm looking at you over here, and you're over here, and you're saying to me, I'm not happy over here, but you're not coming to where I'm standing.
Yeah.
So what is it going to take to get you from here to here? We had a young man, he had 2 children and a girlfriend, and they were in shelter, and he did some things which I could never possibly do and bring my mind to. And one morning I said to him, I said, how do you feel that you come downstairs and have a breakfast and your 2 kids are sitting upstairs and there's no food being made for them? And his response was, well, that's why they have a mother.
Oh, boy.
And at that point, I know where he's at. And he's going to take a little bit longer, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult to bring him to that point where he understands his role as a father.
Responsibility, yeah.
And the responsibility there, too. He was taking care of self. And that's that prideful part that you were speaking of. He was taking care of self and nobody else. And we worked with him until they left. And at one point, I said to the mom, I said, you can take care of yourself. He can take care of himself. But these 2 little darlings, they can't.
Yeah.
And I said, so from my position, unless you start making some decisions that directly are going to positively impact these 2 children, you're going to have some serious situations coming up. And she just looked at me and she started crying, and she knew, because about 20 minutes later, she said, I knew I was going to have to make a move. And I said, well, if you knew it, how do you want to do it? And how can we facilitate it? Yeah. And we did. I mean, we did not deny him any access or anything, but it was clear he was not connected to those daughters. Yeah. It was clear he was not connected to the mother of the girls. He was all about himself.
Yeah.
You can't carry that kind of load as a single parent. So strengthening her to be able to make the decisions to move forward. That's not to say that he's not worthy of our time and effort, because he is. But he wasn't at a point and a place where we could have the needed impact with him. Yeah. And we have a short period of time. It's not like we have a year or 2 years. We have a short period of time when you're dealing with people in crisis. And so it's important for us sometimes we have to cut through all of that garbage and get to the core of the issue. And sometimes it's not as comfortable as they would like it to be, but we end up getting there. And that's where we bring our faith and our love for a person, because we know that there's better for them, and we know where it's available, and we know how they can get it if they're just willing to take that first step. She was willing to take that first step. Now she's working every day. She has a car. She has her own apartment. She's been able to secure daycare for both of the kids. And she's taking care of business. And she's doing it well.
Yeah.
I don't know that she'd have been able to make that kind of establish herself the way she did if she was still carrying the load of him.
You listen to Faith Alive, and our guest is Willi Meyer, and we're talking about family and the importance and necessity of strong families, and Willi sharing his perspectives of what he goes through at La Posada Emergency Family Shelter, a ministry of Catholic Charities. And Willi, I think what was important there too is so many people that are hurting and broken who come to us, to Catholic Charities, And we see, I think, many times where they're holding on to what they think is a relationship that will help them, but is actually a detriment to them personally, and a detriment to their family. Yes. And I think the example you just gave, I mean, that just, brought a spotlight to some of those issues. And I can see where people say, gosh, I'm alone and I don't want to be alone. I want to have a companion on the journey. And you're right, it's scary, but that's where our role then is to say, listen, just because you need that companion or want that companion, first of all, you may not be ready to, depending on whatever you're trying to deal with yourself in what you've ended up here with. But secondly, you might not have the right person, and you're not married. So you have no obligation there. And why don't you, as you, did and helped and supported, to say, you can do this and we'll help you on that journey. And then perhaps when you're at a good spot where you can say, all right, I feel like I'm stable enough to actually even consider a relationship because, and then I won't accept anything less.
Correct.
So I think that's an awesome example of what, we're trying to do with families. And of course, that's just one family.
It is.
Everyone comes in with different background, different baggage, different issues. So trying to decipher and help them, get to that point. I can only imagine just, from a case management perspective, it's like, okay, well, this one is, a new one, and the last one was a new one. This is a new one. How can we perhaps, break through that ice to ultimately help them long term to be successful, especially for their kids, to give their kids a chance to live in a loving, structured, respectful household. So, Willi, we got a couple minutes left. So I think, just want to maybe ask you too, how, other things that we do at La Posada to meet people where they're at, because like we just said, all complex, all
very
different.
Complex.
But, what are some of the things that you're trying to do and we try to do at La Posada?
Well, we try to meet their material needs, because the material needs are very, very heavy, and they're overwhelming at times. We have a great event coming up with our back to school program, where we'll give every child that we've served and every family that we've served over the year, we'll give them a school backpack filled with school supplies for the school year. That takes a load off of mom and dad, so that they know they don't have to worry about that piece and they can concentrate on something else. Sometimes that choice that they make may not be quite the right one, so we always kind of monitor that and encourage them to, now that you got this little relief, let's, make a real sound and solid decision here with how you're going to use what money you were going to use for something else for the benefit of the family. Always bringing it back home.
So you mentioned this program or this gathering coming up, picnic. When is that? And then what could people do if they wanted to help with backpacks or supplies or filling backpacks? What can they do to help, and how can they help?
The event's going to be on August 9th. It's going to be at La Posada Family Shelter. Very first time we've ever done that. We're going to serve a Bach picnic lunch, and we're going to have backpacks. And backpacks are filled with school supplies based upon the list that we've received from the school districts. And we've got 3 different age ranges, and they are backpacks filled with paper and pencils and pens. I can tell you that we need those TX1 calculators, because we have about 22 high school students that we need to get them to, and then composition notebooks and loose leaf paper. So any way you can help with any of that, wonderful.
Sounds great. Go to CatholicCharitiesNWO.org or call the Pastoral Center 244-6711 and just ask for Daniel, and we'll make sure that if you want to help out, you can do that. We're going to head to break, but stay tuned for this week's Charity in Christ by Dr. Ben Brown. We'll be right back.
Last time, I began a brief summary of the history of Catholic social teaching, or CST. We saw that Pope Leo XIII wrote the first social encyclical, Rerum Novarum, in which he drew upon a long tradition of biblical and Catholic thought to address the complex situation created by modernity, and especially the Industrial Revolution. Pius XI took up the banner with an encyclical literally named on the 40th anniversary of Rerum Novarum. Future popes will issue encyclicals on the 70, 80, 90, and 100-year anniversaries. Pius reiterated much of Leo's thought and added several important emphases, as well as the foundational principle of subsidiarity. In 1937, 2 encyclicals respectively condemned communism and fascism, especially Nazism, developing Catholic political thought. 2 decades later, Pope St. John XXIII published 2 CST encyclicals, Mater et Magistra and Pacem in Terris. In the latter, he specifically addressed the problems of the Cold War and the nuclear arms race. He calls for peace in light of the Catholic just war tradition and insists on the unity of justice and peace, something later emphasized even more by Pope Paul VI. But the focus of the encyclical, Pacem in Terris, is actually on understanding human rights correctly in light of natural law and our human responsibilities. This is a very important correction to the modern preoccupation with rights, conceived individualistically, absolutely, and disconnected from responsibility. The most authoritative voice of CST is the Second Vatican Council's great 1965 document on the Church in the Modern World, Gaudium et Spes, which means joy and hope, and which touches on many aspects of social justice. It focuses on the spiritual dimension of the problems humanity faces in modernity, and notably also emphasizes the importance of marriage and the family, a central theme of CST that is all too often underplayed. Gaudium et Spes also addresses the problems of war and nuclear weapons, a theme developed more deeply by the U.S. bishops in their document The Challenge of Peace from 1983, both critiquing the mad policy of nuclear deterrence. Later in the 60s, Pope Paul VI issued Populorum Progressio on the progression of peoples to address issues of international relations, including colonialism. He applies many of the CST principles, such as on labor capital relations and care for the poor, now to nations rather than just individuals, starting another tradition which John Paul II will continue with an encyclical on the 20th anniversary of Populorum Progressio. Paul VI especially emphasizes the idea of integral development, both of nations and of individuals, that is, the flourishing of the whole person of every person, or the flourishing of the whole nation of every nation. Paul VI also promulgates an encyclical on the 80th anniversary of Rerum Novarum and one on evangelization. As Leo said so foundationally, and Paul VI affirms, quote, "If human society is to be healed, only a return to Christian life and institutions will heal it." End quote. Pope St. John Paul II, in his long pontificate, issued 4 social encyclicals, including Evangelium Vitae on the Gospel of Life, focusing on human dignity and the right to life and explicitly condemning abortion in the strongest possible terms. John Paul II's thought, along with reiterating much of the CST tradition, emphasizes the value of work and workers, is in some ways more realistic, addresses women's issues in the workplace for the first time, emphasizes the importance of education in an increasingly knowledge-based economy, warns about the social welfare state, and addresses the problems of an economy that is more financial, that is, moving money around on paper, than productive of real goods and services. Benedict XVI contributes to the tradition with Caritas in Veritate in 2009, emphasizing the unity of love and truth against the dictatorship of relativism. Interestingly, Benedict was the greenest pope up to that point, speaking repeatedly about the goodness of creation and the human task of stewardship, a topic taken up explicitly in 2005 by Pope Francis in his encyclical Laudato Si. Francis also promulgated 2 other social encyclicals, most recently Fratelli Tutti in 2020. His constant theme of care for the poor and marginalized rings out clearly, as well as his warnings about the technocratic paradigm and consumerism, in which everything is used and then discarded as soon as it's no longer useful. Several other documents could be included in the CST tradition, but in closing, I have to mention and recommend one in particular, the so-called Bible of CST, the large compendium, issued in 2004 by the Vatican Office for Social Justice. The Church has so much to offer to the world, and it's our job to learn and share those riches to build up the kingdom of God. That is this week's Charity in Christ. I'm Dr. Ben Brown, Professor of Theology at Lourdes University.
experience the incredible story of a woman who Time magazine named the most influential Catholic woman in the United States. Rita Rizzo, the future Mother Angelica, grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Canton, Ohio during the Great Depression. Rita's father abandoned the family before she was 5 years old. Her early years of trial were compounded by a debilitating illness until she was healed by Jesus through a woman named Rhoda Wise. That healing set her life on a course that would ultimately change the world. Learn the amazing story of Rita Rizzo at the Mother Angelica Museum in her hometown of Canton, Ohio. Go to www.motherangelicamuseum.com. Be inspired. Plan your visit now at motherangelicamuseum.com.
Have you ever wondered how to better understand the Scriptures? What does the Bible say to us in our day-to-day life? This is Peter Sibilio, the Bible teacher at Lourdes University, and I'm happy to answer your Bible questions here on Annunciation Radio. Listen for Bible Basics, a daily feature to help you understand Scripture and how to apply it to daily life. Email your questions to me at feedback@annunciationradio.com and listen for my answers to your inquiries.
Now, back to Faith Alive with Rodney Schuster, Executive Director of Catholic Charities here in the Diocese of Toledo.
Welcome back to Faith Alive. I'm your host, Rodney Schuster, Executive Director for Catholic Charities in the Diocese of Toledo. And you heard earlier in our segments talking about the work that we do with La Posada Emergency Family Shelter, and obviously fits within Catholic social teaching. Our next guest, Father Larry Rice, who's a Paulist and was ordained on May 13th, 1989, and now serves as a campus chaplain at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. He was previously director of the University Catholic Center at the University of Texas in Austin. Father Larry also previously served as the Paulist Father's first consultor, or as they say, chief advisor, vocations director, and director of the St. Thomas More Newman Center in Columbus, Ohio. Father Larry is a native of New York State and a Penn State alumnus. Father Larry also is host of the video series sponsored by USCCB on Catholic social teaching. The titles of those are Option for the Poor, Role of Government, Social Justice, and Dignity of the Human Person. Father Larry, welcome to Faith Alive.
Thank you so much, Rodney. It's great to be with you.
Great to have you. And, you know, we hear so much about Catholic social teaching, and I know there's, we have the 7, elements of Catholic social teaching that the USCCB has on their website. But one of the areas of Catholic social teaching that we don't talk a lot about is solidarity. Wondering if you can unpack that a little bit more for our audience. What does that mean? What is that about? How does that fit within the context of Catholic social teaching?
I'd be happy to. Solidarity is really the principle that says that we are really all one human family. And so all of the work that we do for the common good is for all people, and that we are essentially connected into a single human community. Mm-hmm. And that knowledge should affect how we live our lives and the choices that we make and how we choose to structure our society. It is not a principle of Christianity that says every man for himself.
Right, right.
But rather, the gospel calls us to love of God and love of neighbor. So, who is my neighbor? The answer in the gospel is pretty clear that the entire human family are my neighbor. And so, what does love of them look like? There's always a challenge to say that solidarity is a pose or a particular position that people take or an attitude, but it has to be more than that. Solidarity is never going to be just some kind of virtue signaling. It has to be something that runs much more deeply in our lives, and I just think that that's really important. St. John Paul II, in his encyclical Solicitude Rei Socialis, said that solidarity is not a feeling of vague compassion or shallow distress at the misfortune of so many people, both near and far. On the contrary, it is a firm and persevering determination to commit oneself to the common good. That is to say, the good of all and each individual, because we are all really responsible for all.
Mm-hmm.
I know there have been so many papal writings and encyclicals over the last, 100 years to talk about solidarity as a critical organizing principle for human society and something that as Christian people, we absolutely have to be committed to.
You listen to Faith Alive, and our guest is Father Larry Rice. Father, you mentioned the common good. So, I'm just, for our audience out there, what does common good, how is that defined in our current state in this country, let's just say, in light of the how everything is so politically polarized? Who determines what is common good, from one perspective versus another? How do we break through the definition of common good, let's just say, within our country?
This is a very challenging climate in which to have these conversations because, as you've mentioned, we're living in an atmosphere of really toxic polarization. But the notion of the common good is what has the possibility of helping us to break through that polarization. Something is a common good when it serves the well-being of all people, and something that serves the well-being of one person or people over and against another person or people, by definition, is not the common good. So, for example, as Pope Francis has said repeatedly, and in particular in his encyclical Laudato Si, that the preservation of our environment, our natural environment and the Earth's resources, is probably the best example of a common good. This is our common home, as the encyclical phrases it. And so the preservation of that and the stewardship of it and the careful use of its resources has to be something that is shared by all people. Our natural environment does not recognize national borders or state borders. And we're seeing this today all through this summer as, out of control wildfires in Canada are blowing smoke all across the Midwest and Eastern United States, affecting our air quality. We can't simply have policies that are designed to influence our environment here, because our environment is shared. And so the preservation of those resources and making sure that, the way that our policies function is going to help preserve the good, the health, the livelihood, the resources of all of the world's people.
You listen to Faith Alive, and our guest is Father Larry Rice. And yeah, Father, I want to, echo what you just said, because again, we unfortunately in this country, we look at what you just shared as, okay, well, that's a political statement. Yet it was Pope Francis, but Pope Benedict before him, Pope John Paul II, they talked about caring for God's creation. And so, we do have a responsibility, because God has given this to us, to care for it in a way that, God would want us to care for it. Yet, me saying that, somebody might come out right away and say, oh, well, you're this or that. And we just have to stay focused on the issues, the causes, what is actually happening, and then try to just remove ourselves from the rest of it, realizing that we put ourselves kind of in harm's way, don't we?
Well, in a sense, yes, but the essence of solidarity has to move beyond how we think about particular policies around environment, around the economy, and those kinds of things. That has to penetrate into the personal choices that each of us makes every day. It cannot be something that's just a sort of a vague notion or even a political notion, but the choices I make in my life, I have to realize are going to affect the world around me. So whether or not I choose to recycle, whether or not I'm composting my food scraps, whether I'm, making sure that the purchases that I make are purchases that promote human flourishing and human dignity and don't exploit the people who carry out that manufacturing. We all have choices that we make every single day that reflect the fact that we are all interconnected and that the interdependence that we have is transformed into solidarity when we realize that the resources of creation are meant for all of God's people. And so, as we're arguing and discussing, for example, whether or not we're going to have a new lithium mine out in the West, and realizing that lithium mine is on tribal lands that are sacred to a particular group of people. There are other sources of lithium in other parts of the world, and so we've generated all of these extractive industries that, mine for minerals in other parts of the world, but don't necessarily provide any benefit to the people who live there and on whose land we find those resources. A real understanding of solidarity says that all of these resources have to be used for all of God's people and that we all should be benefiting equally from them. And unfortunately, our economic systems are not designed to promote that.
Listen to Faith Alive. Our guest is Father Larry Rice. Father, I mentioned that you've got some video series that are sponsored by the USCCB on Catholic social teaching. I'm just wondering how people could learn more about those and any that you want to highlight in the context of our discussion on solidarity.
Well, the easiest way to access those is through the Bishops' Conference website, which is usccb.org. Mm-hmm. Under their issues and actions tab on their website, you can find a whole variety of resources around the full breadth of Catholic social teaching, including really good scriptural references and quotations from the last several popes that talk about all of these issues around Catholic social teaching. There was a really good book published about almost 2 years ago called The Church's Best Kept Secret. It was all about Catholic social teaching. And, the title was a little bit of a wink, but the fact is that Catholic social teaching is not something particularly new, nor is it a secret, but it's something that over the last many decades, I don't think has really penetrated into the consciousness of most of our Catholic people. We have some vague sense that it's out there and that we have to make moral choices. But looking at those resources on the Bishops' Conference website, taking a look at some of their videos and reading some of the resources they have is a great way for people to explore that further.
Awesome. Father Larry Rice, thank you so much. God bless you. We'll be right back.
The Christ Child Society of Toledo is a women's organization that serves children in need. Our members tutor children, provide layettes for newborns, teach parenting classes, volunteer in school libraries, and provide new winter coats for children while making lasting friendships. If you'd like to join us in challenging poverty, one child at a time, find us at ChristchildSocietyofToledo.org. Remember, nothing is ever too much to do for a child.
Hello friends, Peter Range here, Chief Executive Officer of Ohio Right to Life with an urgent update for you about an extreme and dangerous initiative. Planned Parenthood and the Ohio Physicians for Reproductive Rights have introduced a ballot initiative here in Ohio that would permit abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy, eliminate any parental rights if you have a teenage daughter seeking an abortion, and eliminate health and safety standards for women. We need your help. Please visit Ohio Right to Life today at ohiolife.org to help warn Ohioans of this extreme and dangerous initiative.
Hi, I'm Father Dave Nuss, excited to share with you the new Friday Commute lineup on Annunciation Radio. First, at 4 p.m., my show, Understanding Scripture. At 4:30 p.m., my podcast, Casting the Net, co-hosted with brother in Christ, Rick Lingvi. We're hoping you tune in.
Now, back to Faith Alive with Rodney Schuster, Executive Director of Catholic Charities here in the Diocese of Toledo.
Welcome back to Faith Alive, and hope you enjoyed this show. Really great to have Willi Meyer, one of our frequent guests, on to talk about his role at La Posada, his role with the Knights of Columbus, as well as St. Joan of Arc, and some of the things he's involved with and engaged with in strengthening the family unit. Also, we had awesome guest, Paula's father, Larry Rice, who's the campus chaplain at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. But also, he hosts a number of video series sponsored by USCCB on Catholic social teaching that include a series for Option for the Poor, Role of Government, Social Justice, and Dignity of the Human Person. So, man, check those out, because that is some, just great information from Father Larry that, boy, we can all take with us, all take to heart, and give us a perspective that we might not have. Because as I mentioned at the beginning of the show today, our families are under attack. And at this point in our world, if we don't strengthen the family unit, if we don't cherish and respect the dignity of the family unit and of marriages, and again, as St. John Paul II, said, boy, that's the basis of our basic world of the community. And so, it's just important that we do that in our own households, and then also in areas like La Posada, where we can help out to support the work that's being done from a ministerial perspective. But like also Willi mentioned, if you want to get involved, like Knights of Columbus, like a parish, do that, because the more community comes together, the more we get that solidarity to reach out and come together and re-emphasize how important the human family is connected. And when we're connected as a human family, we're connected as a human community that affects how we live our lives and the choices that we make. So thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. And until next week, God bless.
You've been listening to Faith Alive with Rodney Schuster. For more information about Catholic Charities programs and services, visit CatholicCharitiesNWO.org. You can listen to this and other episodes anytime on demand on the Annunciation Radio mobile app and at AnnunciationRadio.com.